Hey scientists, Caroline here, and I'm at my favorite spot for a day of fishing. You see, I live close to a small lake with fish in it. The fish are easy to catch and really tasty, so I come out here often to catch my dinner. I've been fishing almost every week for months, and most of my neighbors have too. But there's a problem. I've been sitting here all day, and I haven't had a single bite. What happened to all of the fish? Today we'll get to the bottom of this mystery as we learn how to use natural resources wisely. Are you ready, scientists? Let's get started. Natural resources are materials we get from the earth to meet our needs, like water, wood, metals, and sunlight. These resources come from all four Earth spheres: the geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere. Think about your morning routine. How many natural resources do you depend on as you start each day? Pause the video here to jot down as many as you can think of. You likely wake up in a home built of natural resources, like wood and metal. You might use fossil fuels to generate the electricity needed to turn on your lights. You probably use water to brush your teeth and use plant or animal products to make breakfast. Maybe you even depend on paper from trees to complete your schoolwork. Natural resources include things like water, sunlight, soil, metals, plants, fossil fuels, and more. We can divide these resources into two main types. Renewable resources are resources that are naturally replenished over time, like sunlight or the wind. We can use as much of these resources as we want, and there will always be more. Non-renewable resources exist in fixed amounts. They don't naturally replenish over time, or they form so slowly that once we use them, they might as well be gone. Things like fossil fuels, metals, and sand are non-renewable resources. They take years, decades, or even millennia to form. Once they're gone, they won't be back for a long time. But what about a resource like fish? Do you think fish are renewable or non-renewable? Fish are usually a renewable resource, as long as we leave enough behind to reproduce. But if we remove too many fish, there won't be any left to reproduce, and the population can't renew itself anymore. This demonstrates something important. Some renewable resources, like fish, trees, or groundwater, can become non-renewable if we use them faster than they naturally replenish. Even if resources are non-renewable, we may still depend on them to survive. And the bigger a population, the more resources are needed to support it. But many of our resources won't last forever, so how do we make decisions about using these precious resources? Our decisions about resource use are shaped by many different factors. Let's think about a small resource decision you may make about the foods you eat. Say you're going to the movies and you have $20 to spend on some movie snacks. How would you decide what to eat? Pause the video here and record your ideas. For me, I'd be sure to pick foods that I enjoy, but it would be really important to stay under my budget. I would definitely get popcorn because it would give me a lot of food to snack on without going over my budget. One of the biggest drivers in resource decisions is economics. In fact, almost all resource decisions are shaped by supply and demand. Take a look at this supply and demand graph. As the quantity of a resource increases from left to right, the price of that resource goes down on the y-axis. If a resource is abundant, it's easy and cheap to access. But when it becomes scarce, it gets more expensive. We also use something called a cost-benefit analysis to determine whether the benefit of having a resource is worth the cost of obtaining it. Take fish, for example. When there are plenty of fish in the lake, and all you need is a fishing pole to catch one, most people can have access to that resource, and it won't be too expensive. But if you need special equipment to catch just one fish, like a powerboat or expensive nets, then it may make more sense to find a different food resource to eat. And speaking of special equipment, there's another important factor that determines the resources we use: technology. New innovations can help us access resources in creative ways or harness the power of renewable resources. With inventions like solar panels and wind turbines, we can use renewable resources to generate energy in ways we couldn't before. And finally, people may make decisions about resource use based on cultural traditions. We don't just use resources to survive. We also use them to preserve cultural identities, celebrate history and traditions, and connect with one another. When humans access resources, it impacts the whole system. Luckily, if we understand the system, we can use the resources we need in ways that protect the environment. Throughout this course, we'll explore some strategies that help take care of our environmental system. My neighborhood lake used to be full of fish, and my neighbors and I would come fishing whenever we wanted. So why aren't there any fish biting now? What happened to this resource? Pause the video here and record your ideas. We overused this shared resource, and now the fish are gone. When people share a resource, like a public lake, a forest, or grazing land, they often use as much as they can. They assume someone else will take care of it, or that the resource will always be there. But if everyone does that, the resource gets overused, and eventually, it's gone. Nobody had bad intentions or wanted to wipe out all of the fish. But when people don't consider the big picture, it's easy to lose track of our limited resources. In 1968, an ecologist named Garrett Hardin described this problem as something called the tragedy of the commons, when people tend to overuse shared public resources in their own self-interest, leading to resource depletion. It's a simple idea, but it can have big consequences. Which type of resource is more at risk for a tragedy of the commons? Renewable or non-renewable? The truth is, both are at risk. Some renewable resources, like fish or trees, seem like they'll always come back, but only if we give them time to recover. If we take too much too fast, they stop renewing. But while it's important to make careful decisions about all types of resources, it's especially important to use non-renewable resources carefully, because once they're gone, they're gone. In fact, these non-renewable resources can be major limiting factors for future population growth, so we want to use them as slowly as we can. So how do we avoid a tragedy of the commons? By considering all of the factors that go into a resource decision. Instead of making a decision based only on our own short-term wants, we can think about the big picture and consider the population, economics, technology, cultural traditions, and even the environmental impacts of our choices. That can feel like a lot to juggle, but don't worry, there are tools and strategies that can help. In our next lesson, we'll begin to learn about these tools and the ways they can help us prevent a tragedy of the commons, even as our population continues to grow. As we went through the lesson today, we learned about the difference between non-renewable and renewable natural resources. As human populations grow, we need more resources to survive. But through careful decision-making, we can prevent a tragedy of the commons and use our resources responsibly. In our next lessons, we'll begin to think about sustainability and how we can use the resources we depend on without depleting them for the future. Until next time, remember, when humans interact with the Earth, our actions can have big impacts, good and bad. But through careful decision-making, we can protect the resources we all depend on. Keep asking questions and keep thinking like a scientist. I'll see you next time. Hey, hey.